Okay.
Value to that too.
Good evening. I will call to order Wilsonville City Council meeting for February 21, 2019 at 7:05 p.m. May I have a roll call, please?
Councillor West.
Here.
Councillor Akkerval.
Here.
Councillor Lehan.
Here.
Mayor Knapp.
Here.
And Councillor Stevens is excused.
Thank you. Would the audience please rise and join us in a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council, I'd be open to a motion on order of agenda.
Your Honor, I move that we approve the order of agenda.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Moved and second, we approve order of agenda. Copies are available on the counter at the side of the room if anyone would like to have one. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 4-0. Bringing us to citizen input and community announcements, which is an opportunity to address the council on anything that is not on the agenda. Also a time to address things that are on the agenda but not set up for a formal public hearing. Staff and council will make every effort to respond to questions raised during this portion, either before tonight's meeting ends or as soon as we can thereafter. We do request you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. And let's see. I have a couple of speaker cards, but so far they are all on a scheduled public hearing item. Unless there is anyone else on something that is not a public hearing item, then I think that we can move on from this portion. So seeing none. Mayor's business is up next. I can't even catch up to myself this week. I've got so much business
Mayor,
going on.
Should
Yes.
we ask about introducing our scouts, or?
Well, we could ask, unless you would like to do that at your portion, or?
Doesn't matter. It would seem appropriate under citizen.
Would the scouts like to say anything or introduce yourselves, or tell us what's on your minds this evening?
You can come up to the mic.
Come up to the microphone. Just
Come up
tell us
to
your
the
name and
mic
what you're
and,
working on, if
yeah.
you would.
And tell us your,
a lot of badges.
and your troop number and things like that.
Yeah, just pick one of those. They're all should be working. Sit down
My name
and
is George Krecklow. I'm a Life Scout for Troop 194 here in Wilsonville, and I'm working on my Citizenship of the Community badge.
excellent, excellent.
I'm Meredith Krecklow, and I'm in Troop 194, and I am a Scout rank, and I'm working on Citizenship of the Community badge.
Very good. Nice to see you both here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Part of our inaugural girls.
Yeah, that's what I wondered.
5 girls in Wilsonville who've joined Troop 194, and now that Scouts have let girls in, so part of our inaugural group of girls.
Excellent, excellent. Nice to see you. Thanks very much. Okay, so pardon me, but I will go ahead then. Some of what I've been involved in, the JPAC meeting this morning was the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation for Metro. They voted to support a climate cap and trade program at the state level and crafted a letter on that. I introduced a motion to amend some of the wording, which failed on behalf of the cities of Clackamas County that met yesterday and wanted to see if they could modify that a little bit. But then there was a subsequent motion that put some additional wording in the whereas portions of the resolution that kind of addressed the same sort of question. So it's looking to everybody I talk to like some kind of cap and trade program is going to pass probably at the state level. Yesterday morning, we had the Clackamas County Metro Subcommittee meeting at 7:30 in the morning in Oregon City, which is Good turnout, including several new counselors from some of the different Clackamas cities. It was nice to see some new faces around the table. Had discussion about these items that came up subsequently today at JPAC mostly. I was asked to serve another term as the representative of the cities of Clackamas County at JPAC. So I said I would continue to do that. Those are two-year deals. So,
Congratulations.
oh yes, thank you. It's all glory, let me tell you. New Metro Council President Peterson is calling together a 35 member task force to work on crafting where the priorities should be for a proposed bond measure that would be put before the citizens of the metropolitan area in the fall of 2020 at this point. And I've been asked to serve on that committee amongst about half a dozen mayors. There's also representatives of the private sector, business community, advocates for equity and social justice, and several other, stakeholders on that group. We have not yet met even the first time, so I don't have a real good feel for that yet, but it will be a process I expect will play out probably over the coming year, and then preparing for summer for the promotion, and fall the vote in front of the public. I was asked and was pleased to provide a welcome to Wilsonville for the 2019 annual winter business meeting of the Pacific Northwest Shriners Association here in town. Had about 120 attendees from about 18 shrine centers across the Northwest, as well as some of the officials from the national board, and it was fun, and it's always nice to welcome people to our community there that may not be familiar with it, and so we did that. Clackamas County Coordinating Committee meeting last week was interesting, and it was focused really on the proposal to do a study that's called a Transportation Future Study that mirrors something that was done in Washington County a couple years ago, looking at what the transportation systems are that will be needed in our county over the coming decades, and tries to assess whether we are on track to accomplish those transportation systems in an appropriate way. That effort would be interesting because it's not just metropolitan area driven. In other words, the county areas that are outside of metro boundaries would participate, as well as those inside metro boundaries. Again, drawing on Washington County experience, Clackamas County is promoting at the state legislature, trying to get a allocation of $2.5 million to carry that project to fruition. Observing the limited reach of the Washington County effort, I'm sure that they could well use the funds in order to accomplish the kind of robust study that makes reasonable and rational examinations and looks at outcomes that would be implementable in the real world. So I'm hopeful that that might come to pass. Attended the Clackamas County Business Alliance meeting. Interesting presentation by a group that is trying to start a charter school that's under an initiative called the Oregon Recovery High School. It would be focused on high schoolers with challenges in drugs or alcohol that have need to be in an environment maybe where all of their peers around them maybe are facing similar problems, and there would be support networks and groups working with them. It's based on a model coming out of Houston, Texas, that has demonstrated very significant successes, and I think it's admirable. It's my understanding the Lake Oswego High School system has voted to support this, and they're looking at physical facility somewhere near Mary's Woods, Merrillhurst campus that is apparently available to them to move that forward. I think you will be hearing more about the Oregon Recovery High School initiative in the coming year. Attended the Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting because we don't just exist in Clackamas County. And it went through several things there, but I won't detail that to you. Upcoming tomorrow, Congressman Kurt Schrader is hosting on behalf of the Oregon Congressional Delegation a meeting here in this room involving the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and Fisheries Division, regional and state officials. The topic is really the Willamette River, what they call the Willamette River biological opinion, I think, deals with salmon recovery, related issues of water storage and release on the Willamette system. How do you balance the uses for fish habitat, flood control, power generation, municipal consumption, agricultural irrigation? No less complex than several issues that we have been dealing with, and it will be interesting to see how that goes. Upcoming also, we have the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium have a day at the state capitol where we will be looking to speak with our representatives there. What else? Greater Portland Inc., Small Cities Consortium, which I guess I am now going to be chairing also, so we will see. Lots of things to do. That's enough of that. Would like to invite the counselors to bring us up to speed, and I would request maybe first, Council President Ackervall.
Yeah, I think just wanted to call out something that's not on the calendar per se that's in our packet, but is on the library calendar. And that's something that's been happening regularly on Saturdays, and it's happened in past years as well. I think it's a great community resource, and that's the tax help clinic or workshop, open time to get help with tax projects that we all have at this time of year, from 10 to 2 at the library. So there's one this Saturday and probably the upcoming Saturdays in March as well.
And is that a drop-in that any citizen can just show up and get help with their questions?
Yeah,
okay,
so.
Great. Anything else?
I was, Charlotte and I, well, I lost, no, I got we were talking about the daddy-daughter dances is tomorrow night, but that thing sold out weeks ago, so. Congratulations to all those that have a ticket secured for the daddy-daughter dance tomorrow night, because it's a popular event. They might, yeah. If there's one on the black market, my little girl wants to go. I'm on the wait list. Yeah.
Outside set.
Yeah, no, but thank you. That's another valued community resource and event that people enjoy. So. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilor Lehan.
Yes, I don't, well, hold on. Now I've
Did you
lost
look
my place.
here? I got it right up.
Now I got it also.
Okay.
I would just mention again, the History Pub at Wilsonville McMiniman's Old Church is on the last Tuesday of the month, every month except December. And I was just trying to look up what the topic was this time, but I missed it. I'll tell you later when I pull it up. But I read it just this afternoon. Now it slipped my mind. And then I want to remind people about, which I'll remind you several times between now and then, about our heritage tree dedication coming up on April 22nd for our 2 cable trees. They'll really be, I don't know if you're familiar with these. These are the state brochures. We are in it with 1 tree now. We will then have 2 trees, which really will have 3 trees, but the cable trees will count as 1 tree. But just for comparison, there are only 74, this will be the 74th state tree. So like the city of Portland only has 2, and we will have 2. And Lake Oswego only has 1, and Oregon City only has 1. So it's unusual for a city to have more than 1, and so we're shooting our way up.
For anyone that's listening that doesn't know what a cable tree is, can you give us a
Yes,
very brief?
and I'll tell you, a cable tree is where they used to tie up log rafts on the Willamette. So they have cable scars, or in some cases, cables still sticking out of the bark that they tied log rafts to. And then you had all of these tugboats that ran the log rafts up and down, well, mostly down the river to the mills. There were 20 to 40 different tugboats operating on the Willamette. A lot of them owned by the Bernert family, who has a business in Wilsonville Concrete, and also Bernert Towing, but now it's called Marine something, I forgot the name of. But anyway, they still do marine work on the Willamette. And the exciting thing about this this dedication is it will be, like I say, April 26th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the River Shelter in Memorial Park, and at the dock, where the Bernerts will be bringing their tugboat and have that tied up at the dock so that we can see it, and someone will be there to explain it. This tugboat was built in 1937, and they're going to be taking it out of service before too long. So this is an opportunity to see an old tugboat, and but still working tugboat, and talk to the captains. We have invited a lot of people to this event. Who knows who will show up, but we've invited we'll be inviting the boards of both the Astoria and Portland Maritime Museums, and hope to get a lot of the captains who used to work these boats to come, so that we can recognize them, as well as people from the milling and logging industries of the time. So shaping up to be quite an event, but for anyone interested in seeing an old towboat before it kicks the dust, or I mean, kicks the bucket, I guess, bites the dust, whatever it is, sinks.
Sinks beneath the foam? I mean,
Goes beneath the foam. No, I don't think they would do that. But anyway, it will be an opportunity. So that was all I had there.
all right, thank you very much. Councilor West.
So one of my biggest concerns is that affects the city is stuff coming out of Salem. We talked about during the work session, specifically at West Senate Bill 608. Now it's ready to go on the House floor in Salem. The goal of this bill is to address the increasing rent costs, and that's also related to the housing shortage. And a lot of these costs for affordable housing is also tied to supply and demand stuff. So this bill is very unique. It'd be the only type of its kind in the country. It would impact housing dramatically, which impacts Wilsonville. And unfortunately, the leaders in Salem, I feel like, have just rushed this through, the Senate Bill 608 on the affordable housing with real consequences. You ask yourself, does rent control work? Does it actually lower housing costs? And it asks the question, if it increases more affordable housing. And I just think that a wide breadth of economists have all said no, from conservative to ones that are considered not conservative economists across the spectrum. And so I'm really concerned about the long-term effects here. There's much as a city that we can't do, and that's been expressed, and that's true, but I think that our residents expect us to be a voice for them when and where we can on a policy as far-reaching as this that could have long-term unintended consequences. So I would like to make a motion, I may move to make a motion to have the city do a resolution to ask the House of Representatives to allow this to be debated a little bit longer. And to make the motion to maybe allow for some reasonable amendments, such as like a clause that allows cities to say this doesn't work specifically and this is detrimental to our city, so we need to we would like to opt out of this, or even remove the emergency clause so it allows for just a little bit more debate and implementation. I think it's a reasonable request as a city, not to stand necessarily in total opposition because that maybe have a little effect, but to literally just say, let's be reasonable and pause. And so I like the city to make that resolution.
Okay, so you're making a formal motion at this point, and so we would normally have discussion after we have a motion and a second. So the question is, council, is there a second to the motion?
I will second it for the purposes of discussion, and so you're
Okay,
you
so
can
we have a motion and second, and that then would
away.
bring it to a point of discussion. So Councilor West, if you would like to make a reasonably concise and not too lengthy argument in favor of your motion, and then we'll give other people a chance to speak.
Do that now?
Yes.
Okay. Here's three things I think that the rent control does, and it will do in Wilsonville, is that rent control hurts the middle class and vulnerable populations. It gives landlords little incentives to improve housing stock, and it discourages construction of new housing except for the incredibly wealthy. And the reason why, and we see this in New York and California, is that rent control is so harmful and as a price control, is those that get in early and get the low rent control, they can afford over time, they live there for 24 years paying below market rates, they can afford to do improvements on that property or that unit for themselves. And that's what we see in cities like New York. But those that are on fixed incomes, that are vulnerable, they end up getting a property that's run down, that can't be improved because there's little incentive for the owner to do that. And then you can create really quickly very rundown slum type housing. And people, and the landlord has no incentive to literally to fix it up because there's a mile long line for people to take that property under rent control. And they don't have the income, and they didn't have, because of rent control price caps to improve it. I don't want to see that happen here in Wilsonville. We already are really challenged with affordable housing. I think that this would, also the bill itself allows for a 7% annual cap. That's not bad, but we could also see that ratchet down over time. And what's going to happen is that landlords can just say, well, I might as well get my 7% now. So no matter what the market indicates, I'm just going to increase it 7% because that's what the law allows me to do now instead of being market driven. And I think that you will also see people priced out because of that. So overall, I think it's just a really bad policy, but I think that there's reasonable amendments and measures that could be put forward that would allow us to take a pause, because this does impact cities. It does impact local communities. This is a Portland-driven measure or bill that is a one-size-fits-all across the whole state. And I think that local municipalities, we owe it to our constituents to at least ask for more conversation on the topic and more debate. So keeping it brief, I'll leave it at that. But that's why I'm really concerned. I want to see smaller cities have a bigger voice at the table.
Thank you. Other discussion?
Well, as I discussed in work session, I understand that there are pros and cons to various rent control measures. It's hard for me to see that a 7% cap would result in the dire things happening that you're describing. But, we have packed the house here with people who are experiencing 30 to 50% rent increases, not once, but twice in 1 year. And they were truly desperate. So I understand You don't want the situation like New York with, or where everything is stuck. But if there's mechanisms for reasonable control or reasonable justification, we just didn't know what to say to these people who were desperate and being completely priced out. These were long-term residents of Wilsonville that were didn't know where to turn but to leave town. Now, I haven't spent any time with this bill. I haven't read it, so I don't understand the details, the particulars, or how those increased caps would be. How would they adjust them from year to year or whatever? But I think somebody has to try something to keep from getting into this escalation situation we were in a year ago. And mostly the reason that I would defer, at least at this point, is on doing anything, is that we did set our legislative agenda and priorities, and I know that we have limited resources and people in Salem, and anytime you start spreading it, when we've set, these are our priorities, when you throw another thing and another thing, you dilute your ability to focus on the ones that are at the top of our agenda, and of course end up offending people whose support you need for something else that's more important to you. It's a delicate situation, shall we say, the politics of Salem, and I agree it's extremely frustrating. I've been down to testify more times than I want to count on a variety of topics over the years, and but that's kind of my take is on it, so I'm open to whatever.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
I guess I'd say that you are clearly passionate about this, and I appreciate your passion. I think that housing affordability is something that is important to all of us, and it's obviously a big concern for Wilsonville, outside of Wilsonville as well. With that said, I'm not sure that opposing this is the best path forward. But I appreciate, you bringing it up as something that you're looking at and concerned about. One question that I would have too is what League of Oregon Cities stance is, and I understand that they haven't taken a stance on this. If you'd like to comment on that, but I mean, I would look at
I've been
that.
coached that I need to be recognized by the mayor, so I pushed the button.
Oh, you pushed the button, okay. Oh, and I didn't even push a button, but, that would be one of my thoughts is, let's look at what some of the commentary and the thoughts are with League of Oregon Cities as well, and our staff that also, tracks a lot of the issues that is down there. It's our work in that realm is strategic, as Councilor Lehan has articulated. And so before making a move forward in any way, I would carefully want to have more information than we have tonight on how a position, how a letter, how a stance works within that, strategic environment. And I don't feel like we have that right now, tonight. So that's where I would say I'm not sure that I would support, what you're proposing at this point.
And Mr. Mayor, I would also add that while I'm not comfortable with the city taking a position, there's no reason that Councillor West can't take a position, can't write letters or go down and testify or make appointments with legislators. I certainly have done that before on issues that were not on the city's priority list, but that I was passionate about, and they had to do with housing. They were on accessory dwelling units, and but it was in rural reserve, so it was not not the city's purview to take a position on it. And I didn't want to dilute our efforts on something I was passionate about, dilute our legislative agenda priorities. So I took that on myself and was clear in my communications that I was not speaking on behalf of the council. I was speaking on behalf of myself as an individual. So. And we all can do that at any time.
Thank you. Mr. Cosgrove, staff perspective?
So I've been listening intently to the concerns. So what I would say is I did read the bill. I think our city attorney read it as well. I wouldn't call this a rent control bill as much as I would call it a rent cap bill. And the way the bill reads is that you can't increase rent by more than 7% plus CPI. So that's the maximum that you can increase rent by. It's not locking in any rents like in New York City where there's perversions that somebody who's been occupying that space is paying $83 a month and they can sublet that. This is not what this bill does. I would say it's equal parts rent cap and renters' rights. The other part of the equation was people were being kicked out because they couldn't pay the rent in a timely fashion because of the 50–60% increases. So if you study the bill closely, it's not, I don't think, going to be the horror story that you're talking about in California and New York. But there's always unintended consequences with any piece of legislation. And I don't think anybody would dispute that it's been certainly steamrolled through the legislature, so to speak. So there may be consequences that haven't been thought through. I thought that the LOC's letter was very well written. If you haven't read it, if you'd like an opportunity to read it, I think I did send it to Councillor West and I believe the mayor. I'm not sure if you all got it. I'd be happy to send that to you. They didn't come out in opposition to it, but they did say, here are some things you might want to think about as you're moving us along. I guess the last thing I'd like to say is us doing anything here is going to be like a drop of water in the ocean. This bill's already going to be on the floor for a vote. So us sending in a resolution is going to have zero impact. And then you probably would have concerns on the relationship side in terms of other things that we are working on. So those are all the things I think that are in play at this point.
Okay. Thank you. And I would like to speak on this also. I think there are two sides to the story. Government control is always a concern for a lot of our citizens. I also remember the poignancy of our citizens that have come before this council indicating that they had lived here for a decade or more and were being hit with such sizable rent increases that they did not know that they could continue to live in Wilsonville or what they were going to do if they didn't continue to live in Wilsonville. And the council had no real encouragement or route forward to offer them in that situation. My perception is, much as Mr. Cosgrove indicates, that this is very different than what is traditional rent control in New York City or in California. A 7% cap plus CPI is going to put annual increases at around 10%. It's kind of a ceiling. I suspect quite soon market forces are going to hold it at less than that, depending on what the economy does and what our growth rates do. I think that the city needs to have a study done, and I think that our staff has been preparing to do the work to talk about what methods the council might use to encourage construction of some housing at a more affordable level than the market has been building recently. And I think we'll have the opportunity to talk about that. At this point, I am also aware that an awful lot of testimony has come on both sides of this in Salem already. Certainly the volume of people that are focused on it out of the Portland metropolitan area is a lot more than just the size of Wilsonville, and there has been testimony on both sides of it. I know the property owners and managers associations have been testifying on their concerns about it. So I think that the arguments have been aired pretty significantly, and I'm not aware of any argument Wilsonville could bring forward that hasn't been made already in very significant ways. So I am not optimistic that us expending our political capital, if you would, on this at this time is a clearly indicated for this council, given the concerns of many of our citizens about their rents, nor do I think it would necessarily be very effective. So at this point, I'm not prepared to support a resolution going forward. Without having a debate, I think you've heard, Mr. West, Councilor, the positions. Is there any last words you would like to offer before we vote?
Yeah, I just want to really clarify the resolution is not an opposition of the Senate bill. The resolution that I motion for is that because it's moved wicked fast, that the resolution is the city to recommend more debate, let it be in committee longer. This has huge consequences and it's a big piece of legislation. And the fact that it's going so quickly and not allowing cities to have the ability to have a say in how their housing is impacted based on, my opinion, a self-destructive Portland urban policy is the concern. So just asking for, please put it back in committee, please allow us some amendments, and please give this a little bit more time. That's the biggest criticism of this bill, is that there is no debate, that there has not been adequate voices heard, that any opposition has been 100% shut out on a very big issue. And so since it does affect Wilsonville, I think that we should at least ask for there to be more debate and have more time in committee. That's my motion.
Thank you for that clarification. Other last words we need, or are we ready to take a vote? If there is no further, I will call for the vote on the motion as offered by Mr. West and clarified here in his last words. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Nay.
No.
So it is defeated, 1 in favor, 3 opposed at this point in time. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
could I just add one more thing under citizen thing? I did find the thing I was looking for at McMinimans.
Yeah.
And Mr. Leo will probably be attending this. This is a presentation by Barbara Mahoney, a historian and author, and it is about, appropriately enough, the Salem Click, Oregon's machine, but it's not this legislature. It's the Salem Click of 1850, and this was a group of 8 men who guided the state into statehood.
When is that? What date?
It is now, so you're asking me that again. It's the last Tuesday of the month, February 26th.
Thank you.
And it is at the old church, McMinimans Old Church here. But events like this that are popular, the doors open at 5. The event isn't until 6:30, but it's a good idea to be there at least by 5:30 if you want to have a seat. But you do get to drink beer and things like that. So, so you can pass the time or have dinner. Excellent fish and chips. So, but I think it will be very good, very interesting to hear about this gang of 8, so to speak.
All right, on the 26th. So hopefully we'll have a report back about how that went. Yeah. That will bring us to our consent agenda. If we could ask for the reading of those items, please.
Resolution number 2729, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville establishing a pool a pool of eligible pro tem judges for the city's municipal court. Resolution number 2738, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with PFM Financial Advisors LLC for financial advisor services. And finally, minutes of the October 15, 2018, November 5, 2018, and February 4, 2019 City Council meetings.
Your Honor, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and second, we approve consent agenda as has been read. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 4-0. Bringing us to continuing business, resolution number 2724.
Resolution number 2724, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville adopting the Water System Development Charge Methodology Report and establishing the charge rate and amending resolution number 1624.
And this is a continuing public hearing, which I don't have the verbiage for, but it remains open under the terms of the prior meeting. And I have a couple of speaker cards. However, the speakers just walked out of the room, so I don't know where.
Lost the speakers.
They may not have expected us to get to this point this fast, or.
Realize how quick we are.
We're so efficient.
Must be because of the new council president.
Oh, there are testifiers. Here they are. We have reopened, we have acknowledged the continuing public hearing, and we're ready to take public testimony at this point. If there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak besides those that have passed a card forward, please do complete a speaker card from the side of the room and pass it forward, and you will be considered. So, Mr. James Atkins, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors of the City of West Lynn. My name is James Adkins on behalf of the Home Builders Association of Metropolitan Portland. I just wanted to reiterate and expand and possibly answer any questions you may have about the testimony we submitted. In summary, we were asking for a phase-in of the increase to allow land sale prices to reflect enhanced fees and to allow the market to adjust to cost increases. A vesting of the SDC rates at the land use application to provide certainty in project budgets and avoid unforeseen increases. And this is in comparison to the construction or building permit application period. This is earlier along in the process. And to collect SDCs at the certificate of occupancy or the final inspection so that fees are paid when the impacts to the system are made and increased loan costs are not carried and ultimately reflected on the cost of the home, impacting overall housing affordability. And then also with that, for what it's worth, I believe someone had posed the question about if any other cities had made sort of the policy choice to come in at a lower than maximum justifiable rate. I gave an example of Happy Valley's Parks, which is accurately kind of an apples to onions comparison, even though I should have said Hillsborough is actually implementing a 60-40 cost, how do I say this? They're taking the SDC amount and splitting it 60-40 among systems development charges and ratepayers. Because of the projects, even though they do increase overall capacity and R4 and support new development, there is a benefit to the added capacity to existing ratepayers. And their projects are very specific with the Willamette Water Supply Project. So I can't say for sure if this applies directly to the projects that we're working with here, but I know there is a new treatment plant. There's several projects that I think would overall positive or overall be beneficial to existing ratepayers. I just don't know if the project and the way that the project list and the way that the costs are laid out already account for this, but it's something to consider. So I'm happy to take any other questions you may have at this time. And thank you for listening to my testimony.
Thank you. We'll ask for staff to give us a little perspective on a couple of those points before we're finished here, if we could do that. So, thank you. Mr. O'Malley.
Good evening. My name is Kevin O'Malley, Wilsonville Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors, awesome staff. We're here to make some comments relative to the SDC charges. The staff report starts out saying that the water system should be dependable, adequate, and affordable, and we would certainly agree. Our question comes down to that last one, which is affordable. The consultants and counselors have to look at models. Models involve assumptions. The assumption is that there's more capacity needed, understood. The question of how you pay for that assumption, falling on SDC charges is not disputed. The question of how you bring that to market, however, is a market reality. If you look at real world where we are in Coffee Creek, we've certainly experienced what it costs to build that out. We've also experienced that if the costs aren't in line, what that means, the development doesn't happen. Share with you a situation with a local business, 280 employees, looking to develop in Coffee Creek. I hired the consulting firm to look at what does it take to take that shovel-ready dirt here in Wilsonville to Tualatin, Canby. Canby, not surprisingly, was $350,089. Tualatin, $396,714. Wilsonville, $641,711. People choose to work and live here because it's a great city. The economic realities are realities that I would suggest bear some merit on what you're considering right now. So as it stands in this last year, we are 68% higher for shovel-ready. That's before SDC charges. Another 50% increase in water charges can mean a lot of things. It can mean the window of opportunity for development continues to slip by. Long term, there's a limited amount of dirt. So in a 40-year timeline, it all works out. But in the meantime, what does that mean for the development here in the city? So we would ask and submit that a phased-in approach is a much more realistic. There was a comment made during the work session that if it turns out we don't need it, we can back it off. The reverse of that coin is also true. That you can go in for 5 years, do the actual master planning that's been committed through work session every 5 years and go, okay, we need to increase. So saying that we've got a 20-year timeline and we have to take worst case does not have much flexibility, because very often the economic realities take a couple of years to show up and you've missed the window of opportunity. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on this question? I have no other speaker cards.
Question, well, were you going to call up?
I wanted to ask staff how you would like to follow up on any of the points that have been made. There was, from the Home Builders Association, a written comment with several of the points that Mr. Adkins reiterated.
I think we covered all that in the work session, but if you'd like me to, I could.
I think we should, in the formal meeting, present some sort of perspective for public watching.
So which issues would you like me to address?
The 60-40 split.
I have no knowledge of that policy, why they made that choice, what the impacts.
What would you say ours is? Ours looks like about a 60-40.
I think it's pretty close to that, but I would have to do the math, and I wasn't a math major, so I'd have to have an accountant come up and do that math for me, but.
Or does the finance director, do we have anyone in the audience?
It is between rates and SDCs. It looked pretty close to 60-40, somewhere in that ballpark. You can do it real quick. Just take the total CIP and then the percentage of
Those are those two lines we were looking at.
I know, we need that slide again.
while she's doing that,
My city attorney is telling me that the difference, they're not comparable as you know, no SDCs are between two cities, but
Right,
they're bringing in a new water source.
that's right. They've got a billion-dollar water project, and the anecdote that I heard is that they're entertaining double-digit water increases annually for the next decade at least.
That sounds about right, and I think City of Portland is looking at the same thing with their Bull water supply, Bull Run water supply.
So water is an
So-
increasingly expensive piece, but
To go through the letter in terms of, we collect SDCs at the time of permits, because I believe that's what the state statute says we have to do. Could you do something different? Maybe. What
all right, so there's a point asking HBAS that you lock in water SDC rates at the point an applicant submits a development permit application. What do we do?
We collect SDCs at the time that the building permits are issued, because it's the easiest to administer. It makes the most sense. When you submit your permit, you pay your fees, you know
When they're issued or when you're applying?
when you apply.
So you said when it.
Okay, I misspoke.
Okay, so just
When
want to.
you apply for a building permit,
Yeah.
we estimate what all the fees are.
Yeah.
And we take the check when that is submitted.
All right, so that would suggest that we are doing exactly what they're asking already.
In one of their points, I think they also asked for a couple different things here. I just got this letter, so I'm trying my best to be responsive
I was
to
looking
you.
on page 2 at the bold print right above the start of the Roman numeral 2 paragraph.
Yeah, so the downside to doing it when you submit a development application is that we have had some applications that, I can give you an example with the mental health hospital that was going to be built. That's had 2 continuances in terms of extending those land use applications. So everything, it makes sense why you would do it at the time of a building permit, because it's the easiest to administer and it's the most certain. We have no control over when actual development is going to happen. So you get your land use entitlements, you're off and running. Most times, that development's going to happen right away, but it isn't always going to be that way. So what you're looking for there is a potential administrative nightmare of trying to track all that and make sure that you're collecting when that happens.
All right, so in trying to understand what they're asking for in the written document here, it suggests that they would like to lock in the SDC rates at the point they submit the development application, not the building permit application.
Right, and I think I
that
just-
would be, like in the case you cite, several years prior to,
Could be.
in some cases has
Right,
been, you know.
right.
Yeah. Which is,
Well, plus what that would also do too, it's kind of clever, if you think about it, because anybody who submitted their development application would be grandfathered.
yeah.
So that just hit me just now as I'm sitting here. So all the developers that had submitted for Frog Pond West, they would be locked into the old rate. So of course,
what it would do. That's
that
what
would be
it would do.
awesome if you would want to do that. I don't think it's good policy, but it's something you could do.
So under Roman numeral 2, they're saying it should reflect a 20-year build-out, not a full city build-out?
I think we discussed this upstairs. I wouldn't get fixated on the number of years, focus on capacity.
I'm not sure somebody that wasn't part of that conversation would understand that statement.
Okay, so the system is going to build out. And I think we showed that map. I don't know if we have that available, but it showed what it was in 2000 versus 2019. We've added a lot of land, a lot of urban reserves have come online. We're focusing on what we're going to need to build that out, not over a specific period of time, but what's the absolute capacity that we're going to need for our water plant in this instance.
Okay.
And I think the last one was collect water SDCs at prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy. That's just a really bad, I wouldn't do that. We would have to track that, and I can tell you from a former life that I think they tried that in a city that I used to run before I got there, And I found cases where SDCs had not been paid. The builders didn't pass it on to the homeowners, and we had to end up putting liens on those properties because administratively they weren't tracked and they weren't paid. The cleanest way to do SDCs is when you apply for a permit, you pay all the fees at that time, and that's when you lock in your rate.
Okay, are there any other points you would want council to think about from staff perspective?
Well, there was a discussion of Mr. O'Malley. I think he said, I think he may have misheard me. What I said is, if circumstances change related to what Councilor Lehan said about, I don't know, fixtures or whatever, we can always review that in 5 to 7 years. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact, but we will look at it. As that stuff changes, we should always be looking at that. And then I think there was some discussion about what the impact fees would be for different communities. I trust that Mr. O'Malley got those numbers from somewhere. I haven't seen them. Are we more expensive to develop? Yes. We have a pretty robust treatment process at our plant. I don't know what those other cities have in terms of infrastructure needs for their water. I don't know what their water supply is. I don't know what their treatment is. I don't know what size pipes they have. So every city is going to be a little different. So in the game of economic development, are we cognizant of this and do we care? Absolutely. Are we going to win some and lose some? Yes, we are. So I don't have a good answer for that other than to say it's probably going to be more expensive to develop in Wilsonville than it is Molalla and Canby.
Yeah.
Okay.
They don't have a water treatment plant in either of those.
So that's why I said I don't know. I don't know where they get their water from. I don't know what their CIPs are either.
Wells. Okay, I just did the math based on the numbers that we had. Let me pull them back up again. In the alternative number 4 full SDC, the difference between the anticipated SDC revenue and other city revenues,
Rates.
which is rates, in most cases. There may be a little bit of come to us from the city of Sherwood or other places, but nearly all of that is from rates. It's 67 million versus 41 million. It isn't 60-40, it's 61-39, but that's very close to 60-40. So it is, we already are doing that. And I said that upstairs. It's appropriate that some of the cost, the bulk of the cost of these capital improvements is going to be for the new development. But some of it will be for upgrades to the current system that the current ratepayers will benefit from. But most of it goes to new development, and the current ratepayers already, this is my other point, they already paid SDCs, and they paid a lot to build the plant, so.
Okay, so we're still in an open public hearing, and I was just trying to clarify factually before we kind of debate. Is there any other public input at this point? Anyone that would like to speak? Staff, Ms. Rodacker?
I just want to make a clarification on behalf of Mr. Atkins. What he was referring to is that they adopted 60% of the maximum defended rate. Wasn't that? So in essence.
But that implies that
correct.
ratepayers are paying the other, right?
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that was clarified.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other testimony? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask council then if you have any questions or clarifications that you would like to have before you propose an action, or if you're ready to propose an action.
I move to approve resolution number 2724 then.
All right, motion to approve then. Is there a second?
I will second. Is this for the full SDC, or do we make that decision
Yeah, what do we?
here?
Is this for discussion or?
The staff recommendation is for the full SDC.
Approve the resolution would be the full implementation of the proposal, right?
If we have questions on that further, when do we ask that?
Discussion.
Okay.
Staff, can you advise, does the resolution encompass a commitment to periodic review or update?
Yeah, so I think I said upstairs that best practice is to look at your master plans, especially when they're tied to SDCs for every 5 to 7 years. So I've already made notes to myself to visit with the city engineer and the CIP manager and the CD director to have a discussion about where we're at with all of our master plans, when the last time we did reviews on all of them. So we'll bring an update back to council.
Okay. Councilor West, you have a question?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, and the city to collect fees basically closer to closing up a property. And you said you had a really bad experience with that as in your previous city. I guess my question is, let's say a builder doesn't end up building, but they've paid up front, but they're not going to contribute and build that out. Do they get any of those SDCs back, or does it work, or are they stuck paying the bill up front even though they say markets change? Or I'm just clarification on that.
Sure. I've never experienced a situation where somebody submitted a building permit, paid their fees, and didn't build a house. Could it happen? It could.
Did that happen in Villable, or am I misunderstanding the history around that?
I have not.
I mean, the likelihood of, if something like that happened, the guy got cancer or went belly up, he will sell the property at whatever state it is. Maybe he's got the foundation poured and now he's out of business. But somebody will buy that property at whatever stage it is. If it's framed, if it just got the...
I think that's right.
They'll
Okay.
sell it, and they'll say the SDCs are already paid, so I expect to be paid for that. You know, it's just an asset. It becomes an asset.
By the time they come in to see us and submit a permit, they've already got interim construction loan. They have a buyer on the line. If it's a spec home, then they've already got that interim construction loan, so they're locked in.
Okay.
So their incentive is to get that thing built and sold as soon as possible. But
Okay.
I think Councilor Lehan is absolutely correct when she says that the fees are paid. They have the entitlements, the permit's valid. So somebody, that's going to be attractive to somebody. It will sell to somebody.
I guess my question is around, we saw that market downturn that hit really hard, and so some people didn't develop, right? And then the property, and it was this chaos. And so I'm wondering if that instance, if there's still, let's say, don't end up going forward with that investment, if there's a market downturn, would they still be on the hook? Is kind of am I not understanding it?
So the way development works is the developer comes in and puts in the infrastructure, and then they sell the lots to builders.
Okay.
Right? Sometimes the developers and the builders are the same. They're one and the same. But typically, developers put in the infrastructure, they sell the lots. Then the builder's responsible for pulling all the fees and permits for that. So in the case of Villebois, you had the entitlements, the development was in place, the infrastructure's in place. So the development, if the market goes down, it just sits. It's just vacant, fallow lots. And when the market comes back, those lots still exist. They're legal lots of record.
Okay.
So then somebody would come in and submit a permit, and then they would pay whatever the going rate is at the time that they submit their permit.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
Councilor Ackerval.
I guess I wanted to add the comment, after our discussion in work session and our discussion on other topics tonight as well, considering, the phased-in approach, alternative 3 or alternative 4. Alternative 3, as we discussed upstairs, puts a increase in other city revenues 1.2 million, which would be asking ratepayers to subsidize that 1.2 million. And, Councilor Lehan made some comments, I think that I've sat with since work session 2 about providing the rate stability. And this goes for our current businesses too, not just current residents, but current businesses as well, and their ability to operate and run their business. And our conversation about housing costs and affordability too. People's expenses, people's rates also goes into their ability to stay in their homes. And that's a topic that we hear about too, about rising bills from all sides, in our current residents as well. So that's why I feel uncomfortable putting that even additional increase beyond what is already going to also be coming from ratepayers, for these projects too. But putting additional onto some of the ratepayers' but, you know, by doing that staggering, we have the information now, we have our project net list now, we have our study completed now. And, you know, I think there's been a need for that information, and I'm glad to see in the staff report, in multiple places, I think 2, maybe 3 places, that a real commitment to keep up on this in the future. So we have that information now. It's clear there's a need now for the project list, looking at the money that's needed right now for projects that are going to be happening in this next year. There's a need. So that's why I, you know, it's a difficult decision. It's difficult to raise and to have a steep increase, but that's why I would feel that the alternative 4 is the direction that's most sound right now.
Councilor Lehan.
I would just point out that, you know, when we were being asked to delay, that every piece of delay, even if it was just, well, let's think about it for another month or 2, every bit of delay is a cost shift to the ratepayers. And I hadn't thought about this, but the ratepayers include some big water users like Coca-Cola. And so we have significant businesses. All our hotels are huge water users. So rates are really important to a lot of businesses, not just people in houses. And so I don't want to do anything that causes any more cost shift than is reasonable, because we have the 40% that's going to the ratepayers. But to ask them to essentially subsidize at a higher level than that new development, I don't think you will find people, if you say, would you like to subsidize some of those $500,000 houses in Frog Pond? You'll find no one who will say yes. No one. No existing residents will say, yeah, I'd rather pay higher water rates so that that $500,000 house, which lots of people wanted. There is no affordable housing in Frog Pond. They didn't want us to put any affordable housing in there. So, and we reluctantly agreed to make it all real expensive. So that's what's there. And that's about all I have to say about that. But yeah, I thought that was a good point. The business point is an excellent one also.
I'd like to give my views on a couple of these things. Relative to Mr. O'Malley's testimony, you know, I wish we were more competitive dollar-wise on these kinds of things. We are a very good place to do business, and it would be nice if we had a little more latitude. That said, I'm convinced personally that the proposed projects needed to accompany the full growth of our city into the future are real needs that have to be done. If we don't do them, we're going to get caught short where we don't have the ability to provide services to growing residential or to growing business, industrial use. And I don't want to be in that situation. I personally feel it's significant that we have not done a reanalysis on this since the year 2000. I wish we had done it 6, 8, 10 years ago and had a more modest incremental change. The fact that we did not do that analysis means that everybody that has developed over the last 10 years in Wilsonville has really received a favorable water SDC rate below what it probably should have been if we were going to cover all these future costs. I think it's clear that Wilsonville has provided an ongoing environment for development of housing, and multiple builders have continued to do business here and been successful at building and selling houses at the level that they had to get to be profitable in our community. And that's not true of all communities. We have provided an environment where the home builders could function and function well on an ongoing basis, year by year by year. And I think that that's likely to continue into the future. I want it to be a possibility. I think that $500,000, $600,000, $800,000 houses are not the only need in our community. And I think that we are going to need to figure out how to facilitate or to enable the private sector to do some more modest construction of some housing alternatives as we go forward. And that is a difficult thing to figure out, and yet we're not the only ones grappling with that. Information article that came to council tonight is talking about successful projects to do just that in places like Denver and Tacoma, Washington, and others that have dealt with the same problems. So we need to look at that, the ways that the council might facilitate or enable private sector to be successful in building some more affordable housing are several, and we need to look at that. Lowering everybody's water system development charge and necessarily putting that shortage onto the backs of existing ratepayers is problematic to me. I don't see how that keeps the faith with the people that have come to Wilsonville in the past and invested in Wilsonville, paid the fees that were appropriate at the time that they did so, supported in many cases the city's effort to construct a water treatment plant so that we could be self-sufficient on our water and move forward with the efforts to make ourselves self-sufficient in that way for our community as it grows. We told people that we would be better in control of our own water future by building that plant and making that investment, and I think that has been true. I think it will continue to be true. It doesn't mean that we won't have any costs. We're faced at projects to expand the amount of water that plant will produce. We're told we need to expand it by 5 million gallons a day very soon. We're going to have to expand it by 10 additional beyond that in the 10-year time frame, and figuring out how to do that as well as maintain the distribution system that we have and provide provisions for expansion of that system where there is economic growth is part of the charge that we have. So there's an awful lot of pieces to try to fit together here. If we had done a review, I don't know, 12 years ago, and then another review 6 years ago, I mean, we would have been looking at some modest increases, more modest increases at those times. The fact that we're now looking at such a significant increase is a tough nut to handle, but it's reflective of the reality that we're at and the fact that we have not been collecting what we need to collect to enable us to continue to be a reliable provider of water services to all of our people, current, future, and looking forward to our build out. So I'm pretty much convinced that we need to bite the bullet and ask people to pay the full system development charge that the analysis indicates is needed. I don't see how we subsidize that in any other way than with rates, and that makes no sense to me. We have many other needs as a growing community. We're building roads, we're building parks, we're building stormwater facilities, we're building wastewater facilities. All of these are expensive to do, and it's incumbent on us to try to make that work the best way we can. I wish there was a better answer at this point, but I think that the benefit has occurred over the last 10 years, and I don't see that it's responsible for us to defer or to subsidize that in the next few years. So I think we need to do what needs to be done. Councilor West, did you have a comment?
I'm back on. In much of what you said, agree, Mayor. But I do think there's a valid concern that what I heard out of testimony specifically, the one that stuck out to most to me, is that we miss the ball as a city to not have it all come at once, right? I mean, we've all been in, and maybe around the kitchen table, we've all been around there and opened a bill and be like, oh my gosh, that's double what we expected. And so there is an argument to be made that the rate may or not, that's a pretty close margin to zero. It looks like 1.2 to 0. I mean, it's kind of the margin's not that far from zero, but the 3-year escalation or buy-in from the next 3 years does give a little bit of market adjustment for these people that are also investing in our communities, which are these builders, and growing our beautiful community the way we want. And we re-look at it again in 5 years, that we may have to readjust these SDCs again. But it's also not fair to them necessarily, to these builders right now, that because we didn't necessarily look at this up closely enough and we're on top of it and did gradual fare increases, that I can only imagine the shock factor too that they'd see by the double increase of bill. It seems potentially that that's a fair compromise, is to slowly, just over 3 years, implement this in without the risk of a huge expense to ratepayers or to the city potentially. We know that these models can be a little gray at the edges, a little fuzzy at times, and so there's potentially a kind of a fair workaround for these builders, maybe, as I pose.
You have a motion and a second on the floor.
Do we?
That doesn't include what I think he's suggesting, which is a different motion and a second.
Yeah, which process-wise would mean a motion to amend and see if that prevailed or not.
Vote on the motion on the floor.
Or vote on the current
Or you can vote on.
Or you can call a question on the current vote.
thing. And if it failed, then go to another one.
Yeah. Is there anyone that would
Up
like
to
to
you.
make a move? Is it up to me? Is it up to council?
Well, I'll call for the question then.
Okay, so let's call for the question. So that would require us to vote on the current motion without further discussion.
So this is option 4. Okay.
This is essentially option 4, which is the staff recommendation, yes. Any last comments on?
I thought you said without
Well,
further discussion.
I guess that's right. That would be without further discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstentions?
I heard 3 ayes.
I heard 3 ayes also. Is there a fourth vote, one way or the other? Because he's
I'll
either.
abstain.
Fourth one is an abstention. All right, so passes 3 in favor, 1 abstention, which eliminates the option for another motion. Okay, thank you all staff for all the work you've done on that. Brings us to city manager business.
Just one item, Mayor, I'll be attending the ribbon cutting for, I think Wang's Building Supply. I understand. Wong's? Thank you, because I understand nobody on council could be there. I think that's the same night as the Clackamas County Cities Dinner in Happy Valley, so I think some of you are attending that, so I'll be there to represent the city.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
And any legal business?
No, just go home and read your do not reply all articles.
Haven't read that yet, okay. That being the case, if there's nothing further for council, we will call adjournment at 8:24. Thank you very much.